9 minutes to 7 o'clock. Brentford reportedly close to appointing Thomas Frank's successor. Many fans, well, they're not happy, by all accounts. It's probably not the name many were expecting as set-piece coach Keith Andrews. I know Keith, I've met him a few times a while ago now.
Yes.
Is on the verge of landing the job, but his fellow Irishman and Premier League boss Martin O'Neill isn't so sure he's ready for the big jump.
Keith would be an interesting one, really, because he hasn't managed before. I hope he gets the job, really, because as a pundit a few years ago, he was a particularly vitriolic a critic of mine for the Republic of Ireland team. He derided the use of set pieces that we were using to try and win some football games. And the irony of ironies is it becomes the set piece coach at Brentford. So I hope he gets the job to realise that management is a wee bit more difficult when you're on the field of play than it is actually sitting in the pundits' room. But management is a wee bit more difficult than Keith thinks it is.
Ooh, spicy.
I like Martin. You know, he speaks his mind, doesn't he?
I love him. I saw him actually, Al, early on in the week for the first time since he left Villa.
Uh-huh.
It was good to see him. We had a good chat. We're going to catch up in the next few weeks.
Was he got a little bit irate with me.
Remember the night in the forest?
Yes.
I was with you.
But I don't know why.
I know.
Did they not have a good
I'm
time
not
at
sure.
Forest?
I'm not sure, but I was with you when you asked him a couple of questions. I think one of his answers was like, "Why would I know?" or something.
Yeah.
Remember?
I was like, I've touched a nerve there.
He can lose it, Martin.
Can he?
Oh, I've seen him lose it with players, especially fullbacks. He had a thing for like right back and left backs. Stop the cross. Honest to God, stop the cross.
I like what you just said there, although, you know, I'm sure Martin was talking about Keith Andrews and about, you know, he derided the set pieces, now he's a coach, but did he need to say that or not?
Well, if someone's been criticising you and you're a manager and now they're going to go and be a manager themselves, then you've got your right to
I got the impression he feels he's not ready for the job.
Well, he hasn't been a manager before. He's only been an assistant.
Yeah, you've got to start somewhere.
Of course, but do you start at a club like Brentford in the Premier League? It's a big ask, isn't it? But we never know. He might go in there and do really well. Like you said, sometimes you can...
I think a lot of managers, when you look at football, get a job, you think, that ain't going to work. And it does. And then someone goes in there with a big reputation, you think, yeah, and he struggles.
And
so
now,
it's difficult.
And Keith Andrews is in there already as a set-piece coach. He knows the club. So the owner's probably looking at it and saying, he knows everything about the club. Everyone likes him around the club. So it makes sense. See how he does.
Well, I like Martin, and he clearly knows more than we do in terms of Keith, so we'll see what happens, So let's get more on this with Billy Grant from the Beesotted Brentford podcast. Billy, a very good morning.
Good morning, Billy.
How you doing? You all good?
All good, Billy. Good. Are you getting a bit frustrated? What's happening at your club at the moment? You know, best players possibly leaving, and you think, how are we going to do next year, or is that just the norm at Brentford?
Honestly, I'm not fussed at all. I know that. Listen, I'm not saying that I count for a lot of Brentford fans, but I've been supporting them for 40 years, and I've seen them play in the 4th division. I've seen them play in every single division, and what they're doing at the moment now is truly remarkable. And it made me laugh just listening to Martin O'Neill there, because I sort of thought, this is quite interesting, a view from the Ireland camp. But then basically his all his comments were based on sort of personal, just because Keith Andrews had a go at him. You know what I'm saying? So it was like completely unbalanced sort of reasoning behind why he should actually get the job. So it did make me laugh a little bit there as well. And also it's interesting because Martin O'Neill, and I loved him as a manager, I loved him as a player. But also he kind of reflected the kind of old school mentality of football, which is Brentford has been trying hard to kind of sledgehammer down, because old school football people always sort of say, you can't do this because that football's always been like this. I remember when we were in the Championship, we signed Andre Gray, as you probably remembered. He was playing for Luton in the non-league. And we had Mark Warburton as our manager. Brentford are going to get relegated out the Championship because they've got a manager who's never managed in the Championship, and they've got a striker who's never played at this level. He ends up scoring 20 goals. We end up almost got to the playoffs to the Premier League that season, and we just basically just stuck two fingers up at them, and that's what we continually seem to do. People also forget that Mark Warburton was a banker who became a sporting director because he didn't like his job. His job, and a lot of people don't know this because he told me this himself. His job at the time as sporting director, when Uwe Rosler, who we loved, walked out and went to Wigan, he said to me, "Bill, I've got a list of 23 heavy hitters here that basically, as sporting director, I've got to ask them to see, interview them for a job for Brentford." He goes, "But I went up to Matthew Benham and said, Matthew, don't give them to them, give it to me." And Matthew Benham had a little thought about it. He thought, actually, tell you something, I will do. And he employed Mark Warburton, who had no experience of that at all. Put him in the job, did a great job. Did that. We had a couple of managers that we caught through off the conveyor belt. One from Holland, it was terrible, and then we got Dean Smith, who kind of steadied the ship. But then after that, he slipped in Thomas Frank underneath Dean Smith, gave him 2 years to understand our sense of humour, understanding our football, all this kind of stuff. And then he came and he slipped in, and we sort of kind of basically, I think we realised after that, we said, we need people who understand Brentford, want to do things the Brentford way, and that's the way. So coming back to your question about Keith Andrew, we obviously talk about it on the Brentford Beesotted Pride of West London podcast, Pride of West.London, you can catch it, by the way. And I laugh about this because I just said, Keith Andrew, I've got no idea. I've literally got no idea about him. I know a lot about Brentford. I know a lot of people at Brentford. I speak to a lot of people at Brentford from the top down to the bottom. But Keith has almost like never been mentioned at all. So if you ask me anything about him, I've got no idea other than he's our set-piece coach. Okay, I remember him when he was on Sky, and I remember when he was at Sky. Actually, I thought he's quite good. I quite like him. He's quite analytical. He talks about the game very well. He's obviously done his coaching, but I've got no idea about him. But I think what is interesting is that Brentford do know him. He's been in the camp. He's been in the camp for 2 or 3 years. And they know a lot about him, more about him than I know. And the fact is that if they're actually even considering putting him into that job, right? Because I mean, they do really highly regard their position in the Premier League. They wouldn't do it unless they actually thought that he actually kind of was half decent, right? Yeah. And I'm not doing this because I'm employed by Brentford. So I think these kind of things we have to remember. So when I said people sort of say, "Oh, he's never done it before," and like, Brentford don't care about that. They literally do not care. They're so out there on the way they do things. They're owner owns a tech company where the tech company talks to the T-boy and asks him questions and says, "What do you think about this?" And if the T-boy says something really clever, he'll throw that into the mix. And next minute, that could be part of a sort of £1 million campaign. So they don't care what people think. They just say, "Listen, we have our plan. We have a bigger plan. We're not going to be like Tottenham, hiring and firing people every 2 days, right? We've got a bigger plan. And if this person fits into what we are about and our ethos and all that, we're actually, we'll take them on board." So I think it's actually really interesting they've got him. Yeah.
Well, we'll see,
well
Billy.
said,
Billy, thank you, and good luck to Brentford. I mean that sincerely, and good luck to Keith if he gets the job.